Hello, everyone, and we are going to learn about psychobiology. This also covers neurons and the nervous systems, such as your central nervous system and the other ones. And we will start with that chapter first. So, psychopharmacology has two different areas: pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. Pharmacokinetics is about how drugs enter the body, how long they stay, and how it leaves. So pretty much the drug entering until it leaves. Then pharmacodynamics is what the drugs do inside the body. So today we'll be focusing not on specific drugs, but about how the body naturally and unnaturally produces all of these neurons. So here's a little more about pharmacokinetics. It basically goes through absorption, how the drug enters the body, distribution, where it goes, metabolism, how long it stays, how strong it is, and then excretion. The body finally gets rid of it. And this is saying about how drugs do that. However, we're going to look into different actions you can make and personal behaviors that will cause some of these neurotransmitters to be released that are the same ones that many drugs release. So here's about neurons and neurotransmitters. So there are over 100 billion neurons in your brain, and those go back and forth sending messages to each other all the time throughout everything we do. And to do this, they have an axon terminal that releases electric signals which can communicate with different parts of the brain and its complementary neurotransmitters and axons. And that is how a signal will be sent from the neuron through its axons and then to the destination. So a little about neurons. There can be two main types: agonist and antagonist. Agonists bind to receptors and increase the release of the neurotransmitters. So they'll just boom, hold on to the synaptic vessel that the neurotransmitters go through and increase the flow. Antagonists do the opposite. They will bind to the receptor and keep it closed, stopping the flow. And then not only those two, but we also have indirect or partial agonists, which block the reuptake of neurotransmitters, which by doing so, it's both an agonist and antagonist, because it will block other neurotransmitters from coming in, and by leaving the neurotransmitters trapped in the synaptic cleft, they will continue to work and produce signals in the brain. So let's go over the main neurotransmitters and their effects on the brain. So we have dopamine, which is pleasure. It's part of our reward and motivation system. When we feel that, it's because something gives us pleasure or happiness. Serotonin is in charge of sleep, appetite, has some emotional effects. Glutamate is the excitatory neurotransmitter that is released when we're learning, when we want to put something into memory and using your brain, basically. GABA is the brake pedal. It inhibits things and makes us calm down. And adenosine promotes sleep. It helps the body feel tired when needed. So caffeine is an antagonist to adenosine. So caffeine, coffee, will stop the body from producing adenosine. to keep us awake. And endorphins, there are many different types, but they are the body's natural painkillers and can also be released even during, like runner's high is a form of that. Endorphin is something that makes you feel good. So each of these have a different effect on the brain, and there are many more, but these are the main ones. So now let's learn about how an action potential is created in the brain. So this is a neuron, and they will have a resting potential, which means that they are just chilling. They are calm at this point. So let's say this is the synaptic vesicle for maybe for your one part of the brain. And if neurotransmitters are released from here, it will change the way you feel in wherever the destination is. So to make an action potential, which is when the body releases a neurotransmitter, the electricity first needs to change. So there will be some negative electric energy inside the channel naturally. And to change this to a positive, which is needed positive 40 MV to create an action potential, there needs to be more negative or more positive ions traveling inside the cleft. So the body can do this by receiving different stimuli, such as in class, while learning, maybe repeating the word you want to learn. This can pump more positive ions into the channel, which is almost pushing its positive energy level high enough to release a signal and open the cleft in and out of the channel. So after the signal is released from action potential, then there is what's called repolarization, where the one gate closes and the positive ions begin to flow out through the cleft. And this will also result in hyperpolarization when the energy gets even lower than the resting mode. And then the body will naturally work to restore it to its resting potential balance. Psychopharmacology, so let's just look at some specific kinds of drugs and their effects on what brain transmitters. So stimulants like meth and cocaine, they give the body lots of energy, keep us awake, alert, and they do so by affecting the neurotransmitters dopamine, norepinephrine, adenosine, and acetylcholine. And those are all in charge of either keeping the body awake, or it prevents adenosine, which makes the body sleepy. So different drugs' effects on the neurotransmitters being released or stopping from being released is how drugs have effects on the body and the brain. And then depressants usually calm down the brain, reduce anxiety, such as opioids or codeine, heroin, and those are just maybe the top ones, but they affect the neurotransmitters dopamine, the mu receptor, which is in charge of pain, GABA, and glutamate. And anxiolytics are anti-anxiety medications, and they will affect GABA, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and glutamate. So they will depending on which specific one, it can affect many different neurotransmitters that are all related to emotions and some emotional regulations. Then euphoriants make you feel happy, so mainly dopamine and norepinephrine are involved. Hallucinogens, such as LSD, usually have some effect on serotonin and also 5-HT2A, which we don't know so much about yet. However, it has been linked to many things that scientists are still researching. And then M pathogens, so such as MDMA and ecstasy, they just make people feel great. Serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, all of that. And so you can see what these neurotransmitters are specifically in charge of in this chart here. So dopamine is the pleasure, feel good. Endorphins also feel good, reduce pain, even help someone feel more confident. As serotonin enhances your well-being and happiness, it helps your sleep cycle, reduces stress, so it's related to emotions, and is very important to prevent depression. Noradrenaline, or norepinephrine, is linked to the fight or flight response, so it is related to alertness and attention. Glutamate is helpful to learning, memory, brain health, and it helps throughout all the cognitive processes we do. So neurodevelopment and anatomy. So here we will see how the brain is first developed and how it grows into the adult brain from a fetus. So early in the embryonic period, the brain is actually the first part of a baby to develop. So it will begin by forming a small structure called the ectoderm. And that is where the neural tubes and neurons begin to grow and form. And that first little part is the brain, which then grows into a spinal cord, brainstem, and growing from there. So there are several important parts of brain growth, which we'll go over here. So migration is when the cells move to their final destination. So you can see as the brain begins to develop, even while from 0 to 7 months are the main ages of development of the areas and different cortexes of your brain. So which begins almost 2 to 3 weeks after conception. So beginning with the neural tube, from there the spinal cord is formed in the first month, and then the pathways of each nervous system, which we'll learn about later, begin to form in the first few years. So the neural tube is the beginning of the embryo. So that's the brain is the first part of the body that's created. So cells will also differentiate, which means they will go to a new area and develop into their responsibilities in that area. Synaptogenesis is when new cells form and new areas form in the brain, which actually can continue throughout life. Fun fact. So axons continue to reach out and form. Myelination is when new myelin layers are formed, so that helps the cells and neurotransmitters pass through barriers unaffected. And then synaptic pruning is when synapses are removed that maybe they haven't been used in a long time, so the body feels like it doesn't need them, or it's learned not to use that, or it could be from over abuse of a drug. So now let's look at the first system, the central nervous system. So the main element or components in the central nervous system are your cerebrum, which is the largest part of the brain and is responsible for high-level functions like talking, reasoning, trying to control your emotions. All happens in the cerebrum part of your brain. The cerebellum, its job is to coordinate balance, posture, fine motor skills, and other physical activities. The brainstem is vital because it unconsciously helps you regulate your heart rate and breathing, and also sends messages to and from the body and the brain. Your your spinal cord is also super important part of the central nervous system, because the spinal cord is the pathway all the neurotransmitters take from your hands, your feet, every part of your body to the brain area in charge of processing that stimuli received. Maybe I got hit on the hand, that will travel up the spinal cord into the brain. So your temporal lobes are in charge of some memories, sensations, and perceptions, which we'll learn later. Parietal lobes are involved in sensations as well. Temperature, heat, touch, pain. The thalamus is known as the relay station because signals processed will go to the thalamus and then be sent to the correct or corresponding part of the brain for that specific information. The hypothalamus is where all the memory, that's hippocampus. The hypothalamus is responsible for automatic nervous system responses such as temperature, heart rate, feeling tired, so things we do without conscious thought. And then the hippocampus is where our memory is stored, and the amygdala is called the fear center of the brain. It's involved in some other emotions, and so that is the parts of the central nervous system. Then we have the peripheral nervous system. So this is very similar to the central nervous system in the pathway it uses. And it does so by two different components. It has the somatic nervous system, which connects to the central nervous system. It controls body movements and sends information. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which is in charge of internal organs. So autonomic nervous system has two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And each of these parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic, have the opposite roles. So parasympathetic is fight or flight. It will, as we see here, it will receive stigma from each of your senses. Like it will receive information from the eyes, from the heart, from the internal organs, and send it to the brain. The parasympathetic will do the opposite. After receiving those signals, the brain will decide what needs to be done and send a signal back with an action potential, telling the body what to do. Alright, now we will talk about sleep and wakefulness, with some theories of sleep and about how neurotransmitters play a role in sleep. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, is a very small, tiny area in the hypothalamus that is called the body's master clock. So this tiny part of your brain that is in the middle of all the executive functions and sensory information, it is in charge of following your routines based on what you've done and basically telling you when it's time to sleep, when it's time to wake up, and regulating your sleep based on some factors. So it is based off of rhythm. So based on the body's 24-hour cycle, which is called the circadian rhythm, the SCN will learn to tell you when it's time to sleep or wake up. And a huge component that affects how it knows when to it's time to sleep is light. So light will enter through the eyes, and it will signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus and tell you that light sends a signal. It's time to be awake. So light releases excitatory glands inside the body, like glutamate, which helps keep the body working and functioning well. Then in darkness, the SCN, without light, it will signal to the pineal gland to produce melatonin, which is what the body uses to naturally sleep. So light has a huge effect on that. And then even if there's no light, it will go on autopilot. So it will be used to you, your body, your experiences, and cause your body to be sleepy or awake at the times you usually are. So people also call it the conductor because it regulates the body's organs according to your experience and routines and your 24-hour daily clock. So that's what the suprachiasmatic nucleus does while helping your sleep cycle. So a little more about the circadian rhythm, which is your body's 24-hour sleep cycle. So it's controlled by the SCN, which we just talked about. And there are three main neurotransmitter pathways that affect your sleep cycle. So the growth hormone is released during deep sleep. And so these are the benefits of sleep for your body. So when you're sleeping, growth hormone is released. So deep sleep triggers a surge of growth that is very necessary to repair tissues and brain cells that were used throughout whatever you did that day or week. So sleep is a time for the body to repair and restore parts. It also helps with cortisol. So cortisol is the stress neurotransmitter. It makes us worry. So more sleep helps naturally lower cortisol volume in the brain. And so sleep allows the body to rest and recover. And while sleeping, the brain will release melatonin to signal it's time to sleep. And that happens when there's darkness. And appetite control, so sleep balances some neurotransmitters such as leptin, which tells the body when it's full, and ghrelin, which tells the body when it's hungry. So to regulate your body's metabolism, sleep is very important to reset those clocks and to repair damages. And how can we benefit from knowing this? So more sleep equals a healthier brain. It will help with problem solving, emotions, behavior, even decision making is influenced by the amount of sleep we get. So you can see the symptoms of having poor sleep habits. So there's stress, there's mood swings, there's maybe lack of focus, attention, decision making are all affected. There are some theories of sleep and why our body needs sleep, which we'll briefly talk about here. So the neuroendocrine function. So sleep helps to activate, build, and create more hormones and hormonal pathways. So that's believed to be one major reason why we sleep. So during sleep, hormones are activated and repaired. The restorative and anabolic theory says that sleep, pretty much the same thing. So sleep helps repair, and the brain sends more hormones to balance everything. And people also say stress is a main reason we need sleep, because sleep helps reduce stress and reduce cortisol amounts in the brain. And then there's the circadian and homeostatic two-process model, which says that the sleep is just driven by the brain's clock, the SCN. And when you're awake, adenosine and other chemicals will build up until the brain is a bit overwhelmed and really needs to sleep. And some other ways that sleep is helpful, so it restores your functions, your ability to problem solve everything, gives you energy and homeostasis, so it helps the brain stay neuroplastic, so it helps the strengthen the ties, the synapses, and then the cell strength. And it also helps with memory. Boop. And now we come to the neuroendocrine system. So let's first look at the major parts of this system. There's the hypothalamus, which is the link between the nervous system and the endocrine systems. So the hypothalamus is the one receiving and sending messages and telling orders. The pituitary gland is called the master gland, and it actually releases hormones that are crucial to growth and reproductions. So the neuroendocrine pathway, by the way, is your sexual pathway, so related to reproduction, and is different for men and women, but uses the same parts of the body and the same pathways. So the thyroid gland in your neck is also used, so it helps with energy and metabolism, and other glands in your neck, in your chest, they all assist in this process. And then we have the gonads, or which is your private parts, so it'll be ovaries in females or testes in males, which we will cover after this slide. So the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is your stress pathway in the brain, which is very important because it affects almost everything you do. So when you're stressed, your HPA axis is activated, and a hormone called cortisol is released. So this is all stress, and it also it's excitatory. So when you release stress, it also helps to try to combat what is causing the stress. So cortisol has a double function there. So high levels of cortisol over long periods of time will cause chronic stress, and the amygdala is the brain's fear receptor part of the brain will have increased activity, and too much stress can interrupt signals in the hippocampus, like trying to retrieve memory or store memory. And cortisol can even cause the brain to shrink in size. Then the shrinkage of the prefrontal cortex specifically will affect your decision making, your problem solving, your choices. So stress not only just affects you, but it affects your choices, your operations, your abilities. And there was a test on pups of nurturing moms. So these were dogs, and pups of nurturing moms found out to be less sensitive to stress. So because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which made them the body used to it and prepared to respond, the body more easily did not respond to stress indicators by releasing extra cortisol. So basically, puppies who had nurturing moms responded better to stress stimuli, like throughout their life. Then pups of negligent or moms who did not care for them or didn't really have a part in their life turned out to be more able to be stressed out easily by things. So your initial growth can be very impacted by the environment you live in or are raised in. And also, exercise and meditation can increase the size of the hippocampus and decrease stress. So, exercise, people. Alright, so then we have the pathways that these sexual hormones take. So, for the blue is for men, the pink is for women. And we'll just go over that. So, beginning in the brain, in the hypothalamus, the brain will release a hormone called GnRH. This is released every 2 hours in a constant cycle through our everyday life to keep the reproductive systems functioning and ready. And so it will send that through the pituitary gland down into the testes in men and to the ovaries in women or females. And there, depending on male or female, there will be a different hormone released. So for males, the hormone released is FSH, which is a follicle stimulating hormone that will bind and to the testes and help increase the functionability of the testes. For women, it's also FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, but also it releases different hormones that induce the ovarian follicles to ovulate. So LH does that too, and it releases progesterone and estrogen. Progesterone is what retains the lining in the ovaries, and if not pregnant, progesterone in females, it will drop, and induce menstruation. So all of these hormones are super important to maintaining a healthy reproductive cycle, which is from that pathway. And that is part 1. Tune in for part 2 next.